Hello, let's talk about assignment 4. Assignment 4 is due Thursday. The design is due Thursday, March 26th, the Thursday after spring break is over, 2 weeks from today. Assignment 4 is a property management assignment. So here's the idea. A property management company manages individual properties they'll build to rent. This is kind of a combination of two assignments, and so it's a little bit unrealistic in that a management company can build a property to sell, or it can build its own properties and then rent them out. But in this case, the management company is renting, so they're building to rent. So companies come in and say, I want to have this location. Now, there are 3 classes that you need to build: property.java, 2 data element classes, property.java and plot.java. Plot is the area, the rectangle that the property occupies. And of course, the property is the place that is going to be rented. And then there's management company, the data manager class. The data manager class has most of the methods, add property and so forth, and those are listed here. So let's see what this does. You'll be provided with the GUI. So the first thing is you enter the name of the management company. And the tax ID, it's my management company. And the tax ID is a string. I'll just enter a string of digits. And the fee that it's charging to each renter. And then notice the buttons to add property are all grayed out. The new management company button is highlighted. So when you select it, this plot comes up. The default is a 10 by 10. Now notice that, you can't see it from this chart, but from this slide, but the upper left corner is the 0, 0 location. Unlike the Cartesian coordinate system, where the lower left corner is the 0, 0 location. And in our case, it goes down 10, the depth is 10, and the width is 10. There's a modifier that gets set in the code that you'll see in a few minutes. So once the management company comes up, then you put in each property. So doesn't really matter what you print for property name or city. They are strings. Rent is an int, or double rather. Now the plot value is in X and Y, and width and depth is in ints. So let's say you enter 2, 2, 2, 2. So the upper left corner of the plot is 2, 2. The width is 2 and the depth is 2. You add the property, and there it is. Notice the dialog box that comes up, says note the location, and then it adds it. Now there's a set of images that we'll talk about in a minute, and the images are optional. If it can draw the box, with or without the images present. Now, let me add another image, another property, because and a different rent. So now the key thing about plot is there are two methods. There's encompasses and there's overlaps. So those two methods, you go back to high school geometry and you got to figure out how to make a rectangle that doesn't overlap and is encompassed. So now this property, let's say we say 3-2, so it'll be a little bit different than normal. So it overlaps. So we note the location and it overlaps. So the method returns false, or true, I guess. And it says note the property's location like it did for the first one. But then it says it overlaps another property. Okay, so let's go to 9, way out to the right. 9. So that one is out here, and it isn't encompassed by the overall management plot. So that's what encompasses does. It compares the plot, existing plot, with the overall management company plot. And it is not within the limits, it says. Okay, so let's get a little more reasonable and go to 5, and maybe shuffle it down a little bit just for interest. And there it is. It doesn't overlap, and it is encompassed by the management company plot. And so it adds the method, the management company adds the house and the rent. Now there's a couple other buttons. Max rent. You notice that house 1 was a rent of $1,000, presumably dollars a month. And house 2 was $2,000 a month. Also notice this is a baseball diamond. Who knows? So the max rent amount is $2,000 for house 2. And it brings up this dialog box that says, it prints out the two string for house 2 and the rent amount. Then there's the total rent. 1,000 plus 2,000 is 3,000. So that's the total rent. When you list the properties, so this calls the two string of the management company. Now, what happens with the two string of the management company? It prints out this line, the name and the tax ID. It prints out a solid line, and then it calls two string it loops through the houses that we have and calls two string for those two houses. So here's the same two string you saw a minute ago when we looked for the maximum rent amount. And then we go back to the management company two string, and it prints that line. And one thing that often gets left out is the total management fee. So 10% times 3,000, 2 plus 1, is $300. So it gets $300. Okay. So let's go to the HTML, the Java doc for management company. It lists the different fields. It lists the different constructors. You need 4 different constructors for management company. One that's a default, and this applies to properties too. You need a property default constructor and a management default constructor that takes a plot with x, y set to 0, both set to 0, and width and depth both set to 10. And then there's one with that has this information, the management fee, the tax ID, and the name, and just uses that information. Then there's one that has the name, that has those three elements plus the size of the plot, and then there's a copy constructor. So there's 4 constructors. And then there are a lot of methods. Add property, that is a copy constructor of the property. It's not a constructor. The copy method. And then one that takes just the name and the rent and the city, and one that takes that plus the name, the size of the plot. And then there's the methods that are used by the buttons down below to display things. So the GUI is provided. There's also a driver class that tests the same information, basically. There is a student test class that you need to go in and fill out. Again, I would suggest that you copy from management company test and figure out and change the tests a little bit so that they are your tests. So remember, you have to create a class called property. Here are the details. A data element class named property. This data element class holds a plot, has a plot that's going to be occupied by the property. And then there's another data element class named plot that has the fields specifying X, Y, and left and Y, and depth and width. And this, as I mentioned before, the images are optional. But if you want, so there is an images directory. It's called images.zip provided. And you can unzip that inside the SRC directory in Eclipse. So they don't have to be displayed in order for the GUI to keep on running. So you saw me execute it, and there are a number of example screens in the slides. And that's the basics of